Your Grace, the Lady Karina Leopold is your bride. It's beautiful autumn outside, and the light of the sun sparkles through the leaves that reflect their yellow lights all around. Lord Duke Malayan sits on his throne. He asks his servant Feng the wedding doesn't start for another year. How can that be? Why has she come here? Feng replies with all her importance and concern for her lord that she has traveled a long way, and it would be better to meet her. The Duke comes down the stairs with his butler. He thinks the girl is ill-mannered, and what is she thinking? Yes. Well, how can she arbitrarily come without a letter at such a busy time? With winter on the horizon, the Duke has more important things to do now, like stocking up on supplies to feed himself and getting ready to face the demonic beasts. They stop at the door. The Duke turns to the butler and asks how hard it'll be to break off the engagement since the girl's getting on his nerves. But then a woman's voice comes from behind the door and with a sneer in her voice asks, "Does he really want to break the engagement?" All right then. The Duke wonders if she heard everything. He asks the girl what she just said. The girl enters the palace and says she can break her engagement to him. But in exchange, the girl tries to warm her hands and says the Duke will have to provide her with a place to live here for 6 to 10 months. The Duke asks if my lady is out of her mind, but the girl replies that she doesn't insist on living in the manor house. She'll take the side wing. She shows the Duke her papers, which state that their engagement will now be broken. She looks at him with an innocent face. The Duke looks at the way the girl is dressed and says that the county is probably in distress because from her appearance, she is not in her personal belongings. The girl starts to resist the Duke's words and says that she has nothing with her. She was afraid of getting into trouble on the way, so she deliberately stayed light. The Duke asks how she got here. The girl begins her story by saying that first she traveled by carriage for money, then she got off at a certain place and walked. Then she got into a wagon, joined a group of merchants and set off 2 months ago. The Duke had real difficulty in understanding the girl's logic, for during the whole time she had been traveling, she had never once contacted him. Do noble women make such a difficult journey alone? There must be a limit to the ignorance of the world's norms. The girl sighs a little and says that maybe he's right, but then she smiles sweetly and says that this is her first and last adventure. She opens her eyes, and as if seeing in them all the way she's traveled, she remembers all the moments she's experienced. She's felt for once in her life what it's like to really travel on her own and take independent steps. At this moment, the Duke, unaware of the girl's real situation, thinks that a noblewoman can't make such a reckless journey twice. The girl asks if she can't stay here. The Duke asks, what if he says no? The girl says she has a backup plan. She'll go to the merchants and run errands, and there's no alternative to going back. The Duke can't stand this girl's attitude to his life this time. He just doesn't understand her. And what can she say? Is she really the same girl who was there during the engagement? The Duke remembers this shy, beautiful, and elegant lady who was present that day. He was very puzzled, but he didn't expect her to have such a character. The girl smiles and says she doesn't need this backup plan anyway because your lordship won't refuse. The Duke asks why she thinks so, but the girl looks at him and says that the Duke hates her and she knows it very well. So she's already brought the papers she's already signed. She's known the Duke's character for a long time, so she's ready for anything. She smiles sweetly as she holds up the papers. She thanks him and says she promises to live here as if she were not here at all, and says that if she disappears one day, let him think she's come back. Let the Duke think it's just an annoying blister falling off. She says it's nothing strange. The Duke says it's her own wish and she can do whatever she wants, so let Feng find her a spare room. At that moment, the girl realizes that this is how she started her life in the manner of a fiancé who hates her with all his heart. At her memories, at her family castle, at the dinner table. The man says that today, Leah looks great. She has a healthy complexion. The girl glows at these words and says it's all thanks to her mom and dad who give her herbal remedies every day. Next to her sits a boy who says her food is awfully bitter. The woman who sits next to her says that Leah's health is poor and calls the boy fell. She must eat her food despite the taste. The guy in black says she's got it right because he even bought a present for their poor Leah. At that moment, Fel was very upset that his brother Infric would give a present to Avali, but not to him. But Infric tries to calm his little brother and says that it goes without saying that if he gives something to Avali, he won't forget about his Fel. While the family was eating, the main character was sitting on the sidelines. As a child, she was curious why her hair was a dull brown color. They were all born of the same mother and grew up in the same house, but it's not clear why she got that color of hair. She didn't look like her brothers and sister. Later, she found out that she inherited her hair from one of her great-grandparents. In this memory, the girl stood up and said she was grateful for such a delicious meal. She left the room where everyone was eating. She was walking down the hallway thinking that everything was fine. Now, she didn't matter. But suddenly, the girl falls down. She can't stand up anymore. She says to herself that her condition is deteriorating very rapidly. She wasn't warned that she would die so quickly. A few days before these events, a very good doctor had diagnosed the girl. He said that her organs were only doing half their job. She couldn't believe it. Is it really that bad? The healer says he's being honest. It's amazing that she's still on her feet. Being healthy, she's suddenly in such a bad situation. He says it's probably a disease of the arts. When the girl heard such a name, she clenched her hands, which held the hem of her dress. She knows that among artists, there are people who have outstanding talents and who create miracles. Sometimes there are cases when the price of talent is life force. The healer says that every time she used the ability, her body condition worsened. If she had been examined earlier, she would have known about her illness before it got worse. The girl asks if the healer has told her family about her dire condition. But the healer says not yet, but she'll probably have to tell them sooner or later. The girl looks down sadly while her family doesn't know anything. She tried to tell, but they wouldn't even listen to her in the end out of stupid pride and stubbornness. In fact, the daughter was never unloved by her parents. They always tried to be fair, but when someone got sick, the other children needed care more, and inevitably the choice had to be made in their direction. Parental attention to her quiet and obedient character was no more than a grain of sand. If she told her parents now about her illness, the family would definitely look at her. But what if she was tormented by doubts of conscience, or if they fell for her as they had done so many times before? The doctor asks. Didn't the girl say she was bleeding a lot and vomiting and hemoptysis, didn't she? The girl says yes. It started a month ago, but before that she had some symptoms too. The healer says it's very difficult for him to talk about such a diagnosis, but at best the girl has only a year to live on this earth. Her body won't be able to digest food properly, so it will get weaker and weaker. For the girl, this information was a real shock. Is it possible that all her time in this world is limited to 1 year? The doctor goes on and says that to be clear, a year is too long. The girl, with some understanding just to keep her mind off it, asks the doctor if there is a cure, but he says that as far as he knows, no cure for the disease has been found, but that there may be a method to extend her lifespan. If she is interested, she can come to him again. A girl sits by the window and sees birds soaring through the air. If only she had wings. She realizes that she will die soon, and she also realizes that before she dies, she would like to try everything she has longed for. She doesn't want to pretend and just smile stupidly, and she doesn't want to act like she can handle everything alone. She doesn't want to look like she's giving in to anything. She realizes that if her family finds out what kind of looks they'll give her, that if they see her as an extra problem, she imagines in her head that for her loved ones maybe. She will be unnecessary if it turns out to be the real truth and not just her thoughts. It will break her completely, and she'd better not say it, because it's better to live the rest of her life in ignorance than in grief. She leans against the window and thinks to herself that she could just leave, because for a year, if she leaves home, where will she go and what can she do? She realizes that the ideal solution would be to find a man who looks at her with clear eyes and who loves her or hates her. As long as his eyes reflect who she is, she remembers him asking her the day they were engaged. When they were engaged. Was my lady a squid? The girl was very much surprised at his words, but he went on and told her she was shaking like a squid from side to side if she had no motivation. So why go out? The girl realizes that perhaps he would not have refused such sincere company, so she decides to go north to him, moving on her own feet. Although it is clear that she should have brought some of her things. For safety first, she'll need to change gold coins, a simple change of clothes, some beef jerky, water, maybe something else for self-defense. She also remembers that she'll have to prepare the papers to break the engagement. She also realizes that she'll have to find a doctor again. She wrote it all down in her outline so she wouldn't forget or lose anything. Besides, she wasn't at the meal today, but she noticed that no one came to check on her. She didn't talk about her illness, but it's still a shame that even her closest relatives don't think about her. She's trying to put those thoughts out of her mind. She's got more than a week to prepare. She's got to do everything in advance to be ready for this greatest march in the history of the aristocracy that would dare to walk all the way to the north and lose 2 months on her own. The girl checked that she had packed cash for the journey in a small purse, but she was spotted by a girl, and her memories were abruptly transported to a ball where the guests were gathered. My lady is asked if she knows Mr. Infrick. Now they ask her about her elder brother. They saw the girl talking to him. Before the girl could answer, the lovely ladies started laughing and smiling, for they saw the Count and his wife, who is also very good, and they are talking about their children, not only about Mr. Infrick's older brother, but also about the other children, who are very famous. Mr. Infrick is a very prominent man, and he is also a prominent official in the society, and they say that he is worthy to become the head of the county, although now they hear that recently some lady has sent him a letter of love again. They say no one can resist his perky, friendly nature, but when it comes to the Leopold family, you can't help but think of Lady Leopold Avilia. With naturally wavy, luxurious hair and jewel-like blue eyes, when people see her, she's such a charmer. She's always at the center of society, but the only disadvantage is that she has a weak body. The girls go on talking and say that because of this disadvantage, Avelli is looked after in the county like a little girl. They also talk about a lady who accompanies them everywhere. They didn't see her. The girl is already in her room thinking, did she really get a bad beating that day? She just went home, and then she was scolded. But she is pulled out of her thoughts by Mr. Nocton, who says he is happy to see Mrs. Karina. The girl asks why Mr. Nocton wanted to come. Mr. Nocton says that he decided to come to see Mrs. Avelli because today is the day of Mrs. Karina's physical examination. The girl looks at Mr. Nocton leaving. She was a little surprised that he was going to see Avelli, that she had once had feelings for this man in her heart. Perhaps because Avelli was like his little sister who had died in early childhood. He had always been drawn to her. She had no choice but to give up her hopeless love at this moment when they were about to separate. Nocton notices that Karina has an unhealthy complexion. The girl thinks to herself, since when he wonders, but she says out loud that she just didn't get enough sleep. Mr. Nocton says he could examine with Mrs. Avelli, but suddenly Avelli bursts in. She runs at full speed and crashes into Karina, hugging her with her whole body. Karina almost falls, but Nocton is able to support her in time. He says it's dangerous to jump on your sister like that. At that moment, the girl looks at Nocton, who has come to her, and says she's sorry. She's just happy to see her sister. She asks, lifting her pretty face to Karina's. Did her sister decide to go somewhere? Karina tries not to go into details and says that she's just going somewhere. She also tells Avelli not to mess around on the stairs where it can be dangerous, but Avelli, as always, uses her cute face as an unlimited weapon. That makes her cute face win over other people. But at that moment, Karina didn't react much to the attack that always works, and her face turned pale and dead. For a second, Karina's serious sadness is noticed by Nocton and Avelli. They're amazed at what's happening to her. But the next second, Karina jumps out of her sadness and says it's nothing, and to let Nocton examine her so she'll get better. Avelli says that Nocton does nothing but nag, so she takes Karina's hand and says that she feels much better now, so she wants to play a little with her favorite sister. But Karina says, breaking out of Avelli's tight embrace, that she doesn't want Nocton to come all this way for nothing. At that moment, Nocton turns to Avelli and with all care and tenderness says that he is sorry to hear such words because he has received orders from the Count himself, especially Mrs. Karina has to go on business. Avelli is a good girl and won't be capricious. At that moment, Avelli says that it must be fun for her sister to go out every day. She's a bit downcast after all. Nocton has managed to persuade her. But at that moment, Karina was really shocked that she could now tell Avali that she was so much affected by Karina's feelings for her. Avali had always been particularly obsessed with her, so during her illnesses, she had to stay close to her. She increasingly ignored invitations to tea parties, which was becoming more and more natural, which led to her never having any close friends. It happened every time. Her memories go back to a conversation with her mother. She looked at her daughter with sad eyes at the time and said that she felt sorry for Karina, but that Infric had fallen off the horse and she had to leave. The girl tried to resent her. It was her birthday once a year. Mom said her brother could have been seriously hurt, and Daddy had gone to the academy ahead of her. A birthday present. Let her ask the butler. Then she got cold feet with Karina, and so it went on and on. Every time she was left alone, she felt like she was being used like a common rag and thrown away without even bothering to say a word of thanks or express her feelings. There was a time when she had a baby brother and a baby sister, when her mom told her that she was the big sister now and should take good care of her brother and sister. Then she was very happy because she imagined in her head that it would be very funny and cute and fun because all children want a little brother or sister to play with. Then Avali started coughing a little. Mom then raised the alarm and called everyone to get a doctor immediately. And Karina, at that moment, let her go back to the room. She also recalls the time when Fel tried to take away her birthday present that Mom had personally sewn for her. Fel was very small and cried. Then Mom rushed into the room and was terrified. She yelled at her daughter because she was the big sister and she should have let Fella go. She took her baby in her arms and said that she was like an adult to the younger ones, so she should try not to set a bad example, so she should give Fel that toy quickly. She told her that Karina should be a good girl, but Karina didn't want to give it back to her. Mom then said that Karina was not a little girl and she would tell her father to scold her again. Karina then refused to give the toy back, and Mom looked at her with incredible contempt. She told Karina not to behave like a child. Once there was a case that Karina was very dizzy. She came to Mom, who touched her forehead and realized that she had a fever. Aveli also had a fever. Now the doctor is looking after her. Once he's done, Mom will ask him to examine Karina. And while she's taking her to her room, the butler said while Mama was taking Karina that Mr. Doctor asked Mama to talk to him about Mrs. Avli. Mama said she understood and let the butler tell the doctor that she'll come soon. That day, Mom asked Karina to forgive her, and she would call the maid and let her daughter rest in her room. She would come to see her as soon as she was done with her chores. Mom said Karina was a big girl and could be alone. Karina was very surprised then because her mother would not take her to her room. Her mother said that she was more or less healthy, but her younger sister was much more serious and that she should take it with understanding. She was a smart girl who could do anything and would put up with everything. She had to always give in to her sick little sister. She always watched from the sidelines as all the attention was paid to her, always giving in to her troublemaking little brother. Always giving in to her distant older brother, she was neglected by her parents and eventually closed her heart. By the age of 10, she decided not to expect anything more from them. Instead, she found a new hobby without realizing it was called a miracle. She created paintings full of life and had a real pleasure. Her paintings seemed to come to life. It was like magic. She told Mom and Dad that day to look at her painting, but at that moment Mom said that Infric had won first place in the sword competition, so it looked like he'd be graduating early from the academy. Karina said then that it was to be expected of her talented brother. Mom said that was right, and she didn't know what he was so talented at. Karina tried to show her mom her drawing, but Mom took one look and turned away, saying it wasn't bad. At that moment, it was a big realization for the girl that no one needed her. She heard her mother talking to her father that this weekend, Infric would come back, and a small reception would be held for her, and that Avali had been feeling well lately, which coincided with the girl's tears rolling to the floor. There was also a very expressive story when Karina was drawing something in her room, but her mother burst in and accused her of taking something that was on the table. She didn't believe her daughter's words and told her not to lie to her. Mom said that the thing was in Avali's hands. She had warned her that it could be dangerous. Mom accused her of not listening to her since she was a big sister, why she always upset her. And then Karina discovered something. There was understanding in her eyes. She realized that her words didn't reach her mother. She just said to forgive her, and next time it won't happen again. There was also a story from Dad. He then said that tomorrow is the graduation ceremony of Infric. He thinks to postpone Karina's birthday party for now. She won't mind that her paintings are compared to the outstanding abilities of her older brother, who is praised by everyone, even if the birthday party is later. The treats and presents won't be any less. Mom asked her to postpone her tea party. After all, her little sister is sick and she has to understand and give in. She's strong. She can take it all. She's fine. And the more she agreed with them, the more she sought solace in her paintings. And once she realized that if you put all your strength and soul into your work, it gives it life. A short sketch of an hour, a long day, numerous paintings took on a life of their own and faded away. To her indifferent family, she preferred to create with her own hands. The living images, they comforted her in moments of sadness. Like pets, listened to her stories like real friends. That's how she got into this endless cycle from which there is no escape. Then on the landing, she told Noctin and Avali that she would see them later as she was leaving. She realized that she was in a bad state of health and was holding back from throwing up. Aveli shouted after her and asked her sister to buy something at the bazaar, something tasty like kebabs or juice. She really wanted to try it. Then she wished Karina a happy journey. She's jealous of her little sister. It's actually considered horrible. She went to see her doctor. He asked her if she'd wanted to live for a day. At that moment, he was having his usual cup of tea as if they were not talking to each other, and the girl was not terminally ill. Karina smiled sweetly and said she needed medicine to leave this place. She's never been in charge of her life and doesn't want it to be like this for the rest of her life. The doctor asks where the girl would like to go, but she says the ideal place would be Zentar, on the edge of the north. Then the healer was very surprised and told the girl that it would be better if she just said she was going to the other side of the world. The healer would prepare a cure for her that would kill her instantly. He said that if the girl came to him to kill her, he doesn't do that kind of thing and let her look for another man. Let her go. But Karina says that's not what she meant. She wanted to know if it was possible to get there safely without dying. She planned to spend 2 months traveling. The healer thought hard at her words. He thought that including breaks for a thorough rest in hotels once a week for 2 days. The task will not be easy. He asks the girl why she chose the north because it's a very dangerous place. But the girl says that the north is the only refuge where she can stay. But he disagrees with her and says that it's extremely dangerous there, especially in 2 months it will be winter. The girl says she doesn't see the problem. She'll stay in the room anyway. The healer asks her what she wants exactly. But at that moment, she thinks to herself that first of all, she would like the healer to look at her like a child who knows nothing about life. But out loud, the girl says that the most important thing is not to die somewhere and fall unconscious on the way. She says she wants to leave in a week, but the healer says there's nothing much that can be done about the life force draining from her body because of her illness. But it is possible to slow down her flow for a while. The healer says that he will make the medicine for exactly 2 months. As soon as the girl stops taking it, her condition will deteriorate sharply. Karina was very happy about this news. She says happily that it will be enough for her and she will be able to get to her destination. The girl piles a huge amount of coins on the table. The healer asks who does that because it's a fortune. Why would he need so much? But the girl looks at him happily and says that the healer can consider it a worthy payment for the cure because of all his hard work. She has nowhere to spend the money anyway, so they will meet in 6 days. And he watches the girl leaving. She's so young and ready to give up so easily. What kind of life she's lived so precious, he decides to say goodbye to her. The girl is walking along the bazaar. She thinks to herself that after receiving the medicine, she will be able to leave in peace. These thoughts are incredible for Karina's mind, but suddenly she notices the delicious smell of kebab. She notices one of the awnings under which this delicious dish is cooked. The man who is cooking this kebab tells the lady to try these kebab sticks, and if she tastes them, she will not be able to tear herself away. The girl remembers the words of her sister who wanted to try the kebab. She smiles sweetly and says that she asks the cook to pack 2 pieces. Karina goes home in a carriage and sees in the window her mother that takes care of her daughter, even her older sister. She remembers the words of her sister when she said that it must be fun for her to go out every day. Karina realizes that Avali probably didn't say it out of spite, and she also knows that the girl loves her, but she shouldn't let it go to her head. It's not the first time this has happened. Avali and Fel are little and younger than Karina. Anyway, she should understand and give in. That's what her mom always said about herself. The girl thinks the kebabs will be good as an appetizer before dinner. Karina comes home and sees Fel, who asks where her sister was. He smells the kebab odor that comes from the bag Karina is carrying. He snatches the kebab out of her hands and says that the honorable sister should not worry. Her brother will carry this heavy load. Karina thinks to herself that she is only at times like this considered honorable. She smilingly looks at her brother and says, "Let him go eat with Avali." She asked him to buy her some. When the boy started to leave, happy and thanking his little sister for the goodies, he ran faster than the wind. Karina looked after him. She realized that she was very tired and would probably close her eyes for a while, but suddenly she opened them. She finds herself in a room at night and her father calls her by name. She is incredibly shocked at what could have happened. She tries to get out of bed and holds on to her aching head. She asks why her father is in her room at such a late hour. The father looks at his daughter with a certain disdain in his eyes. He asks why Karina brought Avali's street food. Karina wonders, did she go out of the manor? Apparently the girl is very tired then. Well, the father doesn't hear her. He's not interested in Karina himself. He scoffs and says that Karina shouldn't tell him as if she didn't know, that Aveli shouldn't be fed anything. Karina was very upset and she thought they'd come to her room. After all this time, she only did what Avali asked her to do. Her father goes on to say that Avali's food is not good for her, so she threw up and got dehydrated. Father is very upset with Karina because what is this frivolous attitude towards her little sister? Mom says that dad is right and Karina is an adult now. How could she do such an irresponsible thing? Karina tried to justify herself and say something, but he started yelling and saying that she has no right to justify herself and she should keep quiet. At this moment, even Fel feels that mom and dad have overdone the punishment for Karina, and he is very excited at this moment. Karina thinks to herself that she has to bear it. She should just apologize as usual. They are only worried about Avali, so they are looking for someone to blame. Inside herself, she realizes that it's not fair that she's always the one to blame. She has a sudden change in her face. Apparently, the anticipation of death has changed the girl's character. She asks her father, and then the girl asks her father, what do they want from her? Until when she has to endure, until she dies. A whole year from now, only then she can rest from them, and only then will they finally understand. The father tried to say something, but Karina didn't let him finish. She said she bought food for Avali because her sister asked for it, and now. Let the parents talk to her. Let them explain that such food is contraindicated because it's bad for her health. Her father is upset. He asks, does Karina really care so much about her sister? He can't believe it, but Karina says loudly no, because she thought Avali was fine, so she did what she asked. Mom's shocked and standing at the door. She asks Karina what kind of tone of voice she's using with her father. Now Karina is not well. She has a headache, but she says in her voice that she was only defending herself. Without saying anything out of line, her father angrily says that anyway, when she brings in strange food. But Karina parries and says that Fel was not poisoned and neither was she, so she had no doubt that everything would be fine. Next time, however, she might promise to be more vigilant. With a slightly raised tone, she says that a father should look after his daughter properly. She means Avali. The father can't resist his daughter's arguments and says that from now on, Karina should be careful. The family leaves. At that moment, Fel asks her mother if he can visit Avali. The mother lets the child. The father finally puts his palm to the door and tells Karina that her sister has been unhealthy since birth, and she should realize it. It is unpleasant to remind her, but she is a healthy girl in comparison to her, and let Karina realize it. At that moment, the girl struggled with two feelings: to admit to her father that her death is coming or to keep silent, but she just agrees with her father. She decided long ago that she will not tell anyone about this damn health in their family. It's not only Karina who is healthy, but also Infric and Fel. Why do they ask Karina to sacrifice herself as if she were born healthy? It's a crime. Mom hugs her father and says that Karina's father was agitated because Avali fainted and Karina should treat them with understanding. She asks Karina if their words didn't hurt her feelings. The girl smiles strangely at the end and says to her parents as they leave, "Don't they have anything else to say to her? It's amazing that they remember where her room is. It's amazing that they remember where her room is because they haven't visited her once in the last years." She thought they'd forgotten she existed. Her parents were a little shocked. Going to her bed, she mentioned that her parents should say hello to Avali and that they should go out and leave her to rest. Then the girl lay in bed and worried about her sister. She realized that she was not to blame, but she couldn't let go of her feelings. Karina was worried that everything would be all right with Avali. She remembers that her father said something about dehydration, and she remembers that she had symptoms, and then Karina decides to get out of bed and start painting. Her eyes fill with yellow and she draws a beautiful fairy that she infuses with life force. She bursts out of her drawing and comes alive. When the girl is very worried, she gives herself over to oblivion. Turning to her paintings, they are her only escape. Though it takes her life, she will never let them out of her hands. The next morning, she is spotted by a maid who tells her that the mistress has come down to the meal for the first time in 2 days. Avali and Fel apologize for yesterday, and Aveli says she was wrong and she won't ask to buy her a kebab again. So let Karina take it easy on her and let her sister go out to eat because she's worried about her. Tears rolled down her face. The girl goes into the room where they are eating with the family. She thanks the maid who welcomes her, and also inside herself, the girl realizes that today is the last time Karina sees such meat dishes that are present at the table. But she realizes that she can only eat salad. The father says with displeasure in the voice that Karina's birthday is in 2 days, and the girl even forgot about it, because she usually does. They don't really celebrate her birthday, and it's not a celebration for her. She suffers more these days than enjoys it. On her birthday, Infric's vacation is coming up, and they want to have a family picnic. Karina answers her father that they can do what they want, but she's afraid she won't be able to attend the picnic. She has her own important business to attend. Father asks if it's so important that she can't attend with her family, but Karina apologizes and asks them to have fun without her. She's finished with the meal, so she's going upstairs. The girl leaves the dining room angry. She looks in the mirror and thinks to herself that she didn't think she'd be offended. Even this time, it just turns out this birthday is probably the last one of her life. She's surprised. Why her father asks as if her acceptance goes without saying, without a single regret. Why even her last memory of her family is so awful. She thought that since they were her family, she should say goodbye. But in the end, she just left them a one-line letter. And so ends a little backstory. From Karina's recollection, she is now enjoying a warm bath at the Duke's estate. Thank God he didn't put her outside the day before the Duke told her to let the girl bathe, and then he would talk to her. She is now looking at the vial of medicine she has left. Now she has only 3 pills, after which she will feel a strong deterioration in her health. The girl remembers the words of the healer who said that he put enough medicine, even if there are 3 pills left, she should stop taking it. After 3 days without medicine, she will get a slight fever. Her body will suddenly become weak, and then her condition will deteriorate sharply. The girl dries her body with a towel and thinks to herself that by the time it is about tonight, she will get worse. She remembers her doctor's instruction that if the fever is too high, she can take 1 pill every 2 days. He also said at the end that she should not resist the urge to sleep, as it would be proof that her body is consuming energy. To herself, the girl thinks if she had a grandfather, she would feel the same way. The journey has been hard, but certainly pleasant. She may only have a year to live. She wants to live it the way she wants to live it. She is willing to do anything for that. She will finally be free of her annoying family. The girl enters the office of the Duke, who meets her at the entrance. She notices that the state of the office shows the dryness of its owner, the smell of ink and paper. The Duke must be very busy, and she has fallen like snow on her head. She feels sorry for the poor Duke. The Duke asks why the girl has come to his estate. What's her reason? The girl, a little tired from the day, is embarrassed and asks the Duke if she has to tell him the reason for her visit. The Duke angrily says that if she's going to live in his house, she should at least bother to explain herself. Did she have a fight with her family? The girl says it's okay to say so. Her relationship with her parents wasn't very good. The Duke says he understands that since she's been traveling to the duchy for 2 months, her intention to stay here is quite serious. The girl thinks to herself that the Duke is both right and wrong. Her end in peace and togetherness, where that can be achieved, so she decided to get away from her family, which in all the years of her life has never brought the girl what she is looking for now, especially when she started her birthday. If she had stayed home, it would have been incredibly difficult for her to get through those days. She was tired of being treated like that. They would all be sorry if she died. It was a childish and naive thought for anyone. Sometimes you need time to cool your head. The Duke says it's not the right time. Winter is the busiest time in the duchy, and the Duke will never have to worry. Is overjoyed at the news and says it's a good thing, because that's what she had hoped for. The Duke doesn't understand the reasoning behind it and thinks that this short lady is talking nonsense, but the girl says that it would be all the better for her to move into the annex because the Duke doesn't use it anyway. She's been given a room next to the Duke's room, and she's helping them both, so it would be inconvenient for them to have to face each other all the time. At that moment, the Duke looks at her and doesn't understand. Is this really the woman he knew when they were engaged? She seemed so different to him. He says that the annex needs to be cleaned up. He says that not only does it need to be cleaned, which is a simple necessity, but it also needs to be moved and a servant assigned to it. Karina says she needs a fire and a plate. She doesn't need a maid either. The Duke orders the butler that he must prepare everything. If she's fine, then she can move into the annex at any time. But there's one condition, that the girl must not venture out of the manor. Especially in winter, it can be dangerous. Winter in the north than in the south, you never know. Where and when the demonic beast will appear, says the Duke. Karina says that's good. There's no need for her to go out anyway. She wants to go now. She'd like to go to the outhouse to rest. The Duke says she should do as she pleases. She thanks the Duke for his hospitality, but the Duke says with a sour face that he didn't welcome the girl. He just can't kick her out. But the girl hasn't even left the room. She tells him she apologizes to his lordship, but she must have done something wrong. The Duke and the butler look perplexed at Karina, who is shaking and clinging to the walls. She says she's dizzy and feels fine. At night, the girl finds herself very cold and tries to warm up and wraps herself in a blanket like a big worm. The girl decides that as long as she is able to move, she has to go get a jug of water and a towel to put on her forehead. She takes a flashlight with her and tries to get her bearings. She realizes that this place is bigger than the Leopold family's estate. She hears a sound, and the next moment the Duke appears in front of her. The girl reacts instantly and swings her fist to protect her life from the unknown. To protect her life from the unknown monster that decided to attack her on this cold night. But it turns out it was just the Duke, and she calms down. The Duke asks her why she's up early in the morning. The girl doesn't know what to say, and asks the Duke how he got here. The Duke feels insecure because his mind is a box of clutter, because he was worried. But out loud, he says that the temperature regulator in the outhouse seems to be broken. She's hiding something from him and let her tell him if there's a problem. The girl doesn't look at the Duke's face, so he can't see what she's really like because she's got a fever and he can see the strange color in her face. She tells the Duke that everything is all right and nothing is wrong. The Duke takes the girl's hand with determination. He says that the girl's breathing is confused and her cheeks are flaming, but her voice is shaking. That it's all right. She'll feel better if she rests a little. He feels guilty and says he should have known she was overtired from the long journey. If she feels bad, just take it and tell her why she has to bear it, because bearing it is what stupid mice do. Karina has never heard such expressions. Is she a stupid mouse? She's a bit shocked and insists that she shouldn't be a hero. Hiding the pain only brings problems. If she doesn't want to, let her tell him honestly. The girl admits her guilt and still hesitates to look him in the eye, but the next thing she knows, she's an angry mouse, and she's angry. Why did the Duke start interrogating her in the middle of the night, and when she opened her mouth to express her displeasure, The Duke shows her his hand and asks her how many fingers she sees. How many fingers she sees. Karina looks hard at the Duke's hand and sees 6 fingers in front of her, but she realizes that it can't be so. She tries to guess and says the number 3. The Duke looks at his fingers, puzzled. Did he really show 3? But after looking, he's sure he's not wrong and the girl's in trouble. Looks at the Duke because he's waiting for his reaction. The Duke says, "Let the Lord be witness." But this girl is nothing but trouble. He picks her up in his arms and says, "It'll be all right. Now he'll take her away because this place isn't for the sick. He'll take her back to the main manor, where she'll rest there." He tells the girl he knows she doesn't like him. She doesn't make him a hard-hearted man. They go together. To be more precise, the Duke carries Karina in his arms. He doesn't know what to say. At such moments, they walk in silence for a while, but a little hesitantly, he says he'll call a man who will take care of her so Karina doesn't have to worry. Karina is already a little tired and asks the Duke not to call for a doctor. He obviously didn't expect her to say that and takes her further. He says she should rest first. The last words Karina said were that the Duke promised her. He looks at the girl lying in front of him. He doesn't really understand what she's trying so hard to hide from him, and no matter how hard he tries, she won't tell him the truth. The events take us back 2 months. Then the father is told that a terrible thing has happened. Mrs. Karina has disappeared. The father asks, "Is it really that serious?" She sometimes goes out on business without prior notice, and why the maid has decided to cause such a panic this time. The maid apologizes and says that, in her opinion, she's not just out of school for a long time. Today she went to clean Mistress's room and found a letter on the table. The letter had only 1 line written on it, saying that Karina was going on a trip, and signed Karina Leopold. After a while, her father and his wife were discussing the incident. Her mother said that she hadn't gone on a trip without saying a word to anyone. Her father asked the maid when she had last seen her. The maid confessed. She probably last saw her 2 days ago when she was away, but she didn't see her yesterday. She doesn't remember them running into each other. Father asks the twins if they saw Karina yesterday. Aveli answers that Karina wasn't in the room. She thought she had gone to the bazaar, and Fel says she hasn't seen her sister for the last few days either. Father tries to show the others his confidence and says that Karina must have been offended that her birthday and the picnic overlapped. He should have chosen a different day. Then the older brother went after Karina and told her that if she was offended, she should say so because she shouldn't forget that her father and mother love her. She replied that she was their child too. They love her, but apparently the proverb doesn't apply to her. Mom said that she didn't. She left a piece of paper knowing full well that they'd all be worried. Imagine if she didn't want the picnic so badly, she could have just said so. Her older brother says that she couldn't have gone very far, so let's send all the people to find out where she's gone. Mother asks the maid how much money has disappeared since she talked to father and says that if you add up yesterday and today, it's about 2 gold pieces. Father starts to smile. He says that Karina couldn't exactly go far away. She'll only last a week or 2 at most, and when she comes back, he'll give her a good telling off Mom couldn't find a place to stay. She said she hoped that nothing bad would happen because she was very worried about her. Her father at this time said more threateningly that unscrupulous Karina had paid her parents with black ingratitude by running away from home. Forgetting what her privileged life costs them, she should have been reminded. After a while, the father in his study shouts at his daughter Karina Leopold's mansion. He's furious at her childish antics, and what could she possibly be thinking? Resentment, 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 but it's too much. The mother comes into the room and asks what happened at her dear father's house. Karina has left the Southlands. The trail is broken. She was last seen riding in a carriage towards the capital. Her mother is in shock. What are they going to do now? Where is she now? Her father says that putting himself in Karina's shoes, he understands her feelings. But how she could think of doing such a crazy plan is unthinkable. Mother says maybe she's in trouble, to bring her back, but father says there's no point in forcing her back if she's so fed up with her home. Let her do what she wants. She left the manor, of her own free will, and won't cross the threshold until she bows her head and apologizes. Father says to his butler, that he should tell the pursuers to keep looking, and he doesn't care how much money it takes. She asks if he's being cruel to her. She realizes Karina was reckless this time, but she was just upset. She shouldn't be so angry. Her father, who can't find his own place, tells her mother not to go after her. Who in their right mind runs away from home because their birthday party got postponed? They have to worry more about bad rumors ruining their reputation. But they'll get over it. Karina's not that strong and will come back as soon as she senses things are bad. Dad asks her mom how Avali is doing. Maybe she's lonely. She used to fall asleep and wake up with Karina's name on her lips. Mom holds her head up and says she's always looking sadly into Karina's room. What else is there to say? She's much better than her thoughtless sister. She's like a child, but quite thoughtful. Karina's mom also helps, that there was a reason for that. Dad asks what that reason could be and what she was deprived of. Was it personal money and welcome gifts? Mom says she had nothing to complain about, but she acted like a capricious child. She thinks that Karina has always been well off. Dad says they'll wait another month and won't talk about it. Somewhere far away in the north, their little Karina wakes up. She finds herself in a room somewhere on the estate of Duke Malayon, who now sits behind a chair, watching the girl that the temperature continues to hold, so let the girl not get up. Karina wonders why he's still here. The Duke says he promised after all. Karina was adamantly against the doctor, and he doubted whether he should call a man to look after her now. So he decided. He decided to stay with her until morning. Otherwise, why else would he look through the documents here instead of in his comfortable office? The girl asks if she's bothering the Duke, to which he says, how could he be bothered by caring for a sick person? She's a guest and he's the host. The deal she proposed is still in force. She's free to behave like an ordinary guest. The girl is very happy about it. But the Duke says that everything can be brought to her, no matter what she asks. The Duke himself has never taken care of anyone, so he doesn't know much. It's the first time he's had such an experience. The girl smiles and bleeds and says it's nice to have someone by her side when she's sick. She used to look after her brothers and sister too. The Duke catches the gist of her words. He thinks to himself that she was probably talking about the fact that no one had ever sat with her before when the Duke heard that the youngest daughter of the Leopold family was in poor health. Where there is a sick person, relationships are difficult, especially when it comes to parental love. She will always tip the scales to one side or the other. The Duke notices that the fever is not going down, and things don't smell good. Karina is sweating and a little delirious from the fever and remembers that she still has the medicine that the doctor advised her to take in case of a similar situation if it gets very bad. She can take it once every 2 days. The Duke was about to go and look in the girl's bag to see where her medicine is, but the girl takes him by the arm. He says she's got a fever and she's talking without realizing it. Karina asks the Duke not to go. The Duke sees Karina's serious face. He says that her stubbornness is stronger than any chains and sits down next to the girl. She's glad that she's been able to persuade the Duke to keep holding his hand. Her weakened body is chilled and her eyes are dark, but the pleasant warmth of his touch brings a smile to her lips. The Duke asks the girl to sleep before the dawn comes, but the girl keeps holding his hand and says if she falls asleep, he'll leave the room. But the Duke promises her that he'll stay in the room with her until she wakes up and he'll be there for her, so let her go to sleep. The girl is very surprised. It feels so wonderful, like she's getting a birthday present she never dreamed of. The Duke looks at his desk where there is a telegram. Apparently, he will have to send it when winter is over. He returns to his thoughts of the girl and realizes that she seems to be tormented by something. He thinks she's at home and should be supported for the next 3 or 4 months. After a while, the Duke goes into Karina's room. He mutters a little about the fact that the fever's barely broken and she's already out of bed. But the girl doesn't see a problem with this behavior at all. She smiles playfully at the Duke because she was bored just lying there. And what's the point of wasting a few moments of her short life the Duke doesn't know about it? It's been a week since she recovered from the loss of consciousness, and in that time, some things have changed. First of all, her health has deteriorated so much that even when she walks calmly, she starts to have shortness of breath. And secondly, the Duke started to come to her room every day and look after her to check on her condition. He put his palm on her forehead as a greeting. The Duke is glad that the fever is finally gone completely, only he can't understand why. She shrinks like a frightened rabbit when he touches her. She needn't be afraid of him because he won't eat her. He asks Karina if she would like a snack and says she has some appetite, and she might like to eat. She thinks to herself that she doesn't want to show her face to him so as not to annoy him with her presence. The Duke says he'd like to eat too, so he suggests she go together. He'll wait for her at the door, and she can take her time getting ready. Though at first the Duke seemed indifferent to her, he still showed her a touching concern. The Duke. As he walks with Karina, he thinks that he will be away from the manor quite often anyway because of the demonic beasts, so the girls don't have to go back to the outhouse. But then Karina suddenly asks if the Duke will go on demonic beast hunts. She'd like to try to go with him. The Duke looks at her sullenly and says it's out of the question. He also tries to change the subject and asks the girl if she likes to draw because he noticed in her bag the drawing materials. Karina was very surprised. She says she likes it, but in her mind she doesn't even think the family asked her such questions. The Duke points his finger and tells the girl to go up to the roof of the manor one day. At sunrise or sunset, she'll have a magnificent view. But as the Duke turns to the girl, they bump into each other. He apologizes to the girl and says that in return, she must promise him that she'll be very careful if she wants to go up on the roof because she's not in good health. He reminds her that there's a cold wind in the north from morning till evening and she should dress warmly. And before going to the roof, she must warn him or the head butler named Feng. He also points out to the young lady that she must remember to come down every hour to warm herself. The girl thinks that the Duke is too demanding and that the servants probably don't like him. The Duke says she must remember all this if she doesn't want to become a dried squid. The girl remembers their engagement when he made a similar joke about her. Has she forgotten what she looked like when she was engaged? She was hanging around the maids like she was tied up, and it was written all over her face that she was brought in by force. If she didn't want to get married so badly, she could have just said so. Karina says the Duke must understand that her parents arranged the engagement without even asking her consent, saying it was a matter of long standing. They didn't come to the engagement ceremony because of another of Avali's fits, and then the girl comes out of her thoughts and apologizes to the Duke for her rude behavior. The Duke asks her not to apologize. It was also his fault for not asking her opinion, wanting to fulfill the last will of his late predecessor. In fact, the Duke would ask the girl that if she didn't like something. She'd tell him directly without any secrets. It would make life so much easier, Karina thought to herself that she'd never told anyone before. What she liked about the engagement, she didn't refuse or it would have fallen on Avali's shoulders. The Duke asks Lion what kind of food she likes, that she doesn't like fatty food. He says affirmatively that of course such a delicate girl needs delicate food. If she's hungry, they can hurry. She marvels at the place they're in. The Duke, with some superiority in his voice, seems to be trying to boast that the winter weather in the north is harsh. But during the snowfall, it is insanely beautiful. The architects of the north have done their best in building the glass dome. The girl asks with some trepidation when it will snow to see this beautiful miracle of nature. The Duke replies that this year has been a cold one, and he thinks it should snow around the beginning of next month. The girl says her county doesn't get much colder in the winter, so you won't see snowfall. Malayan says that's for sure, for the southern winter is no match for the northern. More importantly, her food is getting cold, so she must hurry to eat it all. The Duke has ordered that the servants put all the lean food on her side. She realizes that the Duke even thought of her at home before the meal. She couldn't have expected such an attitude. The Duke, seeing how weak her appetite is, asks the girl a little angrily, is she so weak that she needs to be spoon-fed? The girl thinks to herself that she feels rather awkward. How could she think the Duke was an indifferent man when she didn't know anything about him? What a fool she was. The girl says his lordship can call her Lion or Lion, which will be a little easier. The Duke asks the lovely lady with interest in his eyes what she wanted to tell him. The girl, a little worried, says that she went to his estate without giving him prior notice, but she did it because she feared that she might be accepted. She looked away at that moment, because she couldn't look him in the face. The Duke says he would have refused anyway. but not because she is unpleasant to him or burdening him in any way. It's just that it's dangerous enough to be here. She shouldn't take his words to heart, which were said to them on the day of her arrival, and the Duke should apologize for them. The girl next moment asks herself inside whether she should tell the Duke about the disease of art. There's no guarantee that the situation will change for the better. Worst case scenario, she won't be able to stay in the duchy any longer. She decides. The best solution is to keep it quiet for now. The Duke says next time he'll ask her to cook more dishes, to her liking. Now let her eat more slowly or the chef will pay. The girl is already in her room. She is very happy about the conversation. She hasn't eaten so much in a long time. She looks at the beautiful day that's playing outside the window and wonders if she should go up to the roof tomorrow the next day. The Duke was very angry with Karina. He couldn't find a place. How and why she decided to go to the roof in a cape and forgot her promise. The girl remembers the promises she made to the Duke. First of all, to warn Malayan or the butler, and only then to go. Secondly, to dress warmly, and thirdly, to come down every hour to warm herself. But when she decided to get up on the roof before the early dawn, everyone was asleep, and no one was there. She was sorry to wake them. She wanted to take a peek, but when she did get up on the roof, she couldn't capture this beauty of nature on her canvas. She had a little sketching to do, but at some point the Duke came up behind her and scared her and hugged her from behind. He was very angry that she didn't tell him she wanted to turn into an ice cube. He would have given her a real ice bath. The girl says she just lost track of time. Seeing such immense beauty, the Duke says it's moments like this. But the next second, he decided to make a joke and says that Karina would like to be a living heater at times like this and save money on fuel. The girl says that if the Duke is cold, she can share her blanket, and she decides to show her drawing at the moment she was handing the drawing to the Duke. As she handed the drawing to the Duke, thoughts were running through her head. Infric is an excellent swordsman and a member of the Emperor's personal knight squad. Fel can repeat. Anything from the first time Avali with her golden hands can masterfully make embroidery of any complexity. In comparison with their hobbies, her paintings are not worth a penny. The Duke looks at Karina's work and says that looking at her art, he realizes that excessive modesty is also bad. He says with some anger that he is not very knowledgeable in this field and can't give an expert's opinion, but that this painting is truly. Impressively, the girl is really confused by these words, and it is not clear whether she has flashed red from illness or from emotion, or perhaps from all of them together. The Duke says that he could never have imagined that the scenery from the top of his estate could be so beautiful, and asks Karina to be more confident. The Duke says he's already anticipating what the finished version will look like. Karina says she knows he's flattering her, but she's still very pleased. The Duke replies that if there's no potential, he'd advise him to find something else to do. He asks Karina to give him the drawing when it's finished. He wants to ask a talented friend of his to evaluate the drawing on its own merits. The Duke is a little embarrassed when he says this. Karina says that of course she will give it to him, but asks him not to evaluate it because that's not why she draws, that she was only painting to escape her loneliness, and she is ashamed to admit it. The doctor comes into the room and says with some mockery that his lordship doesn't know how ladies dress and wraps her in a pile of blankets. The Duke tells him to keep his jokes to himself. He tells her that the long journey seems to have taken its toll on her health. She has also spent this morning on the roof in the cold wind, so he asks that she be examined carefully. When the doctor tried to examine the young lady, she hid under the blanket as if under a cocoon. She said quietly that she had asked him not to bring the doctor. The Duke says that her own thoughtlessness has forced him to call the doctor. Let her get out from under the blanket and let herself be examined. The girl refused. She wouldn't let the doctor examine her. The Duke lifted her up with one hand and ordered her to go to bed like a little child. The doctor looks at all this and says the Duke shouldn't do that. A noble lady should be taken gently in his arms. The Duke turns to the doctor and says he's already very careful with her. The physician takes his head and says his head is going to explode. Is the Duke talking and treating the lady like a negligent soldier? He tries to explain to the gentleman that the Southerners will not tolerate such rough treatment. The healer tells the girl that she must not hold a grudge against his lordship and asks her to hold out her hand to him. The healer takes the girl's hand and she falls asleep almost instantly. Apparently, the temperature is rising. The physician says the girl is very ill. Her pulse is unsteady and weak, and the sound of her heart is distant and vague. Even the bruises on her arms are present. He turns to the Duke and says that this is very rare in the north, but it's probably a disease of the arts. He tells the Duke that the Empire of Ios originally received the blessing of the arts. The north has only recently been invaded. But in the south, starting with the capital, there are a lot of famous artists. Sometimes people are born who have received too much of this blessing. Often they create a miracle with art, also called divine right. The Duke remembers that there is feriole music to which he puts his soul. The music has the power to heal. The healer says that he is correct, and the Carlos family is a famous family of artists even in the Empire. The Duke says that this squid, or rather Lady Leopold, has the power to perform such miracles. That it probably does, because the vague bruising on the inside of his arm at the armpit is one of the symptoms. The Duke realizes that even he, who knows nothing about art, is in awe of her drawing. The familiar landscape never seemed so beautiful to him. When he looked at the landscape she had drawn, it was as if he could feel the view. The doctor says her illness is now in its late stages. The disease of art is divided into several types. The first, when the symptoms of the disease are only a slight loss of strength. The second, when the limbs or senses fail. And the third, rare and almost unheard of, when the force takes away the vital energy as payment. The Duke asks, "What's the worst that could happen if the lady dies?" The healer says it's rare, but it's still possible. It's possible. The Duke says it's cruel enough for God's blessing anyway. This power is beyond human. The Duke can't ask her because she fell asleep because of the fever. He asks the baker how such a disease can be treated. The baker says that as far as he knows, there is no cure for such a disease, apart from the usual painkillers. The Duke is left to watch the girl lose her limbs and die. The doctor says to keep her alive, she must first give up art. But that's unlikely to happen. The Duke, sensing the possibility of saving Karina, cheers up and asks, "Can art be more valuable than life?" "Why not just give it up?" The physician says, that it can be compared if you look at it from your own side. For example, if the Duke was in danger of death or loss of limb, he would have left the sword. The Duke takes back his words. He goes on to say that all those who are ill with the disease of art value their gift too much. The Duke looks at the sick Karina and thinks to himself that it was out of the question at the time of their engagement. He sends a message to Feriol. The physician says the girl is very weak, so they must be as careful as possible, and he will leave them antipyretics at night after taking care of the girl, the sight, to go out on the balcony and smoke a little. He remembers that at the betrothal ceremony she kept casting a sorrowful glance at the seat where the heir to the duchy was sitting. And his younger brother, when anyone came up to congratulate them, she would smile, and it annoyed the Duke terribly, and then he couldn't help calling her a squid. He thought she'd be angry, but she laughed good-naturedly. The Duke sends the letter through his mailhawk, with whom they rubbed faces a little. It would be nice if the answer from Feriolu came before the cold weather sets in somewhere in the south. Karina's healer and teacher, Nocton, decides to head north. He says Nocton must look after the clinic until he returns early next spring. He may not wait for him. Nocton warns the teacher that it's dangerous up north in the winter, but the teacher tries to reassure him and says it'll be all right if he goes now. He'll get there before the frost. Nocton says that winter will start during his journey and why he needs to go there so urgently. The healer says that about a month ago, a lady came to see him. A lady who stayed a short time because of Art's illness. She said she was going to go to the north. He's worried about it, so he should go there in the north. Is there no Koreans who Art? Nocton says that his master should not hurry because he said that she has not long to live, so it is that rare type of art disease. The healer says that it is true that this is the first time he has encountered such a type in his practice. In her condition, nothing can be done, and she will probably die. Nocton asks why he's following her. The physician says it seems to be a young lady of noble and wealthy birth. And judging from her condition, her parents didn't care for her at all if they paid any attention to her, but it wouldn't come to that. The physician says that one way or another, Nocton is in charge, and even though he's not proud of it, he has to be impartial with his patients. If he hears something bad when he comes back to the clinic, he won't let it go. Nocton tries to convince the teacher that everything will be fine and that he has memorized all his instructions. He also asks who the patient was, and the healer says that I think her name was Rena or something similar. He can't remember. Anyway, Nocton's main task now is to take care of the clinic when the healer has left. Nocton is alone. He thinks about the name Rena. Could it be from the Leopold family? Although Rena is a common name. Besides, there's no way she could be sick. Meanwhile, at Leopold Palace, the first month of Karina's absence has arrived. Father says there has only been one report that her trail was lost in the capital, and the search continues. The older brother says that maybe the soldiers should be involved in the search, but the father says they can't do that if they don't have soldiers within the capital. There might be misunderstanding from the emperor. And the father doesn't understand who the daughter is so stubborn. Infric says he still feels uneasy in case something has happened to her. At that moment, the father starts looking at the portraits of his children and family, and he notices that he hasn't had a portrait of Karina all this time. Father walks through the palace and remembers Karina's words. She said then that it's amazing how they both remember where her room is and that they've never visited her in recent years, that they'd forgotten about her. Her father thinks that since Avalie is always sick, her room is the closest to the stairs, to make it convenient for the doctor to come. Infric goes to work every day, so his room is next. Fel, as the youngest of the brothers, has the room after her and Karina's room. He remembers that the girl used to tell her father that she didn't like her room and that it was too scary for her and too far from the stairs. Father remembers that he scolded her then, saying that an older sister shouldn't be capricious. Thinking back on it now, he thinks she was just a little girl and really could have been afraid. Except for the day he came to tell her off for giving her street food without permission. He asks himself when he last went to Karina's room. He goes into Karina's room and wonders if this room is a bit cramped for a grown-up girl. She had something to say if she needed anything. He notices Karina's pencils and drawings. He starts to look at them and remembers that the year before last, Avalie was feeling well, and they went for a walk together to that place, and Karina was not with them, and he was wrong. The mother comes into the room and asks the father what he's doing here. He replies that he's just thinking. Why did she come here? The mother says that she can't get over Karina's leaving, so she decided to come in, although her room seems so unknown. The father shows Karina's drawing and they look at it together. The mother says she hasn't seen her drawings for a long time. The father asks in surprise if Karina used to draw. The mother replies that when she was a child, she used to bring her drawings to show her. But apparently at some point the girl got shy and stopped. Her mother thought she'd given up. Is she doing well now? Her father says Karina's a smart kid and she won't go to waste. He'll send telegrams to the aristocrats he knows. The mother's looking at her daughter's drawing. She's never expressed any dissatisfaction. So why did she leave? Avalie's always wondering. When her sister will be back and Fel keeps trying to go looking for her. Everyone is so worried about her, her father says. That she should look after Avalie while Karina is away. We can't let her condition get worse because of her anxiety and sleep deprivation. They think they can send a telegram to the Duke of Malayon just in case. Though it's very unlikely that Karina would travel so far north, the road there is dangerous, and it would be hard to get there with the money she took. So father thinks that Karina didn't dare to make such a journey. At best, she stayed somewhere in the capital. He'll sort it out and don't let the mother worry. He'll ask around the capital. The mother looks at her daughter's drawing, and for some reason she thinks that the girl was unbearably lonely. Avalie visits Nocton. He asks her why she is sad. Avalie replies that she is thinking of her sister. It's been 2 months since she left home. Karina Leopold is a quiet and inconspicuous child compared to her gorgeous golden locks. Her dull brown hair doesn't catch the eye, but her blue eyes are extremely beautiful. Avalie says her sister was always there for her when she was sick, so even without friends, she was never lonely. If she asked to read a story, She would read if she asked to sleep together. She agreed if she said she was lonely, she didn't go out with friends and stayed with her. She says that when she was little, she was a little jealous that her sister could leave the house, and sometimes she kept her there on purpose. But she doesn't do that now. Nocton says Mrs. Karina was a good big sister, but he thinks to himself that there's a possibility that maybe she didn't love her that much. He remembers that back then on the landing, Karina said those words that she believed her sister would understand. She murmured quietly at the time. They were so sincere that it makes him wonder if they didn't happen. Nikita tells Aveli that it's better she doesn't worry and tries to get better so she can go looking for her. He thinks to himself that she should have written at least one letter thinking of her sick sister. But suddenly Aveli says that she wants to show Nocton one of her sister Karina's talents because she found this beautiful drawing in her room. He's amazed at how beautiful Mrs. Karina's drawing is. Aveli says she found it in her sister's room. It's very beautiful, and she doesn't understand why she didn't show it to anyone. Aveli says that if she drew a drawing like this, she would immediately run to brag to her mom. Her sister is very gifted, and at that moment, Nocton realizes something. He says he has to leave because he just remembered an urgent matter. Nocton leaves the room and takes out the patient's clinical chart. He reads there that the name of the disease is art, and it's signed that he has only 1 year to live, and the probability of survival is very low. He can't believe such a coincidence.